Hey everyone, this is Sean from Sean Woodwork, and in today's video I'm going to be building this jacket holder. This was a really fun project. This is exactly the kind of thing that I got into woodworking for. A client reached out to me and asked to solve a problem. They said, hey, this entry that I have is a little bit small, and it doesn't have a lot of room, and we have a lot of jackets and shoes. And so this will actually be a two-part project. I've got the shoe rack on the left and then the jacket holder. In this video, I'm just going to focus on the jacket holder, and I'll make a video for the shoe rack as well. And this project, I really loved it. It's one of my favorite projects to date. And you can see here the original entryway that they have. So they've got a small metal shoe rack, and then I think that's probably some sort of an IKEA jacket hanger. And the door doesn't even open fully because the shoe rack is in the way. To kick off this project, I started in SketchUp, and I started to model out what the inside of that entrance looked like. I came up with several different designs that I sent to the client. It's really nice. SketchUp has a module where you can share the designs with the client, and then they can kind of look at that in 3D. We finally landed on a design that you just saw, where we've got the wall hooks there for the jackets, and then the shoe rack sitting on the stairs. And that really helped to kind of solidify and get everything just perfect before we kicked off the project. So the first thing I've got to do is figure out how I'm going to make these hooks so that they fold down. I remember one of my managers as an engineer told me that something that I will always remember. He said, fail fast. And I certainly did that on this project. I did a lot of prototypes. As you can see here, I went through quite a few different versions and lots of different hooks, and finally kind of worked it out. So the first thing I need to do is cut that slot. So I'm going to make a template to do that, and I will make a fairly simple template, but what's really important is the gap between, so basically where I'm going to be routing out. So I try to get that at exactly 20 millimeters, and then that will set the gap between the two boards there on the side, and allow me to route out the exact distance that I need. So I cut that strip down in the middle. I cut it in half, and I'm not going to put glue on the smaller piece there because that's the length that I want to route out, but I use it as a filler to hold the two pieces while I glue them, and to hold that gap. And just to be on the safe side, I'm going to put a little bit of sandpaper on the back of this template so it doesn't slide around. I will also use clamps, but this will just ensure that it stays on the top of the wood. So the first thing to do is, I've already got some wood glued up. I'm not going to show that. I think you all know how that works. And I'm going to lay out all of the slots that I need to cut on this piece of wood first, just so I can see it. Even though the template's going to align everything correctly, I want to see where I'm going to be dropping my router bit. And now here you can see that template is now loaded on top there, and I'm going to use a bit that I got from Trend. It's a very short bit, very shallow bit with a bearing on it, and it's a flush trim bit, and I'll just be doing a bunch of passes here. I think this probably took me 5 passes maybe to get down to the depth that I want, which is also 20 millimeters. If you're interested, I'm going to put these SketchUp models onto my website. I'll leave a link down below. It has all the dimensions. Again, there is no perfect science. I think you could build it exactly as I have it in the plans, but I think you could also play around with the dimensions a bit and get maybe a little different angles and the hooks and things like that. Once I get to a certain depth, I can actually just take off the template now, and you see that now I've got about 5-6 millimeters of depth there. I can actually use that to get down further and continue that line all the way down to the depth that I need. So I had a 9-to-5 job like a lot of you for the last 26 years, and about a year ago I quit my job to pursue this. This has always been a dream of mine to try to start a woodworking business, and for the last year it's been a little bit slow here and there working on some things. In the last couple of months it's really started to pick up, so it's taken about a year to sort of get off the ground. I'm really enjoying it, especially with a project like this where I get to solve a problem. Somebody comes to me and says, hey, I need something for this area, and they don't really know exactly what they want, but we can kind of work together and collaborate and go back and forth until we come up with something. And then seeing it come together, for me, that brings a lot of joy to woodworking. Just exactly the kind of thing that I always wanted to do. Once I've got all of these slots cut out, and apologize for the camera wobbling there a bit. I think my stand is not so stable anymore. But once I get all these slots cut out, I will go back here, and that's what I'm doing here. I've lowered the bit now about 1/2 millimeter. And I'm going to take one final pass through them all, and that just ensures that every single one of them is at the exact same distance, and I won't have to mess around later with one that's maybe slightly different. And because my router bit is round and I need square corners, I've got to go back in with a chisel. That's pretty easy. I just have a really sharp chisel. I keep it sharp throughout this process, and I can almost do this by hand without the use of the hammer. Now I've flipped the workpiece over on the back side. I need to cut the slots. There's 2 slots, so there's a 8 millimeter slot that runs the whole length. It goes through those slots that we just put on the front side. And once the 8 millimeter slot is done, then I can go back in and I'm going to put about a 5 millimeter by 20 millimeter slot. And that's just for a panel that will cover up that 8 millimeter slot. So if that's not making any sense, it will in just a second when you see it all come together. And now you can see that wider slot, which is only about 5 millimeters deep. And that goes from one end to the other end. So basically I'm just stopping it a little bit beyond the 8 millimeter, and I've just got to square up those ends again. Also on the back side I've got to put in some keyhole slots, and that'll be used to hang this, and I'm going to use 4 of them. The 2 on the top will take the load, and the 2 on the bottom will just keep the jacket holder from sort of coming away from the wall or lifting up easily. So here what I'm doing is I've set up a pretty simple template with some, I've stuck down a couple of pieces of scrap wood and some blocks on the end because I want this keyhole to be perfect. Now, sort of as a decorative addition, I routed a thin slot. I think it's 5 millimeters along the length on the front side, and I'm just putting a strip of maple down in there. And I think that'll look really nice. It also breaks up the glue seam where I put the boards together. Even though it's well matched, the color is slightly different, so I think it looks really nice. And to get that maple flush then with the surface, I'll just come back and use a hand plane to get it almost all the way down. I don't want to damage the surface below, so I'm being a bit careful here. But I've got my hand plane set to take off not really a lot of material. So now I've got to start making the stock for the hooks themselves, and to do this I'm going to use the thickness planer to first get the width exactly right. So I want that to just fit in those slots that I just milled out. So I'm only taking off maybe very, very light passes, less than 1/2 millimeter every time, and then I move over and check the thickness. Once I've got that nice fit, then I can start working on the depth. So now that I've got the pieces in there, they fit really nicely. I'm just going to use my marking knife to mark the correct depth, and then I'll use my thickness planer again to get down to that knife mark, and that will get me right to the correct height. Now I've got to figure out where to put the hole into those hooks. So I put the hook in, and then I flip the piece over, and I use an 8 millimeter drill bit down in the slot, and I can slide that over and make a little bit of an indentation, and that's exactly then where that hole needs to go for that hook to sit perfectly in the slot. The final design that I came up for these hooks is a little bit complicated, quite a few angles, and so to cut these I'm going to do this on my sled on the table saw. So I've marked out the angles on one of my hook blocks, one of the blanks, and now I'm just going to use some double stick tape to hold down some other blocks that will get that just at the right angle. So I'm just sort of eyeballing this to get all these angles, and because I appreciate my fingers, I decided to clamp that down since it's such a small piece. I basically did that for all of the angles, just drew the angle on the blank and then sort of eyeballed it, and then ran it through the table saw. Eventually here I got all of my blocks set up, and I could go through and make all 7 or 8 of these hooks. I think I made a few extra just in case. Once I got the angles sort of cut, I went and got out my protractor and started checking the angle of the coat hook to make sure that it was coming down correctly. After that was done and I got all of the angles cut into the hook, I had to use some sandpaper and do this all by hand. It took quite a bit of time to get this maple nice and clean. Once that was done, I could reinstall all of the hooks and hold them in temporarily while I sand over the top of this whole thing. So then that makes sure that everything, the hooks and the piece of maple down below, the strip, are nice and clean. I could also take it over to the saw because the hooks are now a little bit long, and I can just trim off the tops of those hooks right to the top of the coat rack. Now I need to start prepping the dowels that will go in that 8mm track on the back side of the coat rack. So what I've done is I figured out I could slide one dowel that is just almost as long as the gap between each of the hooks, slide it over into the hole, and then just sort of keep making my way over. Eventually I've got to put a gap filler, a couple of them in, and you'll see that in just a second. Now that I've got all the dowels cut, you can start to see how this will go together. So what I've done is I've cut all the dowels so they just fit in between the two hooks. And that'll allow me to get one dowel in, slide it over, get the next dowel in, slide it over. And because it's touching, that'll keep it from coming out and moving. I can make it all the way down to this end, where then I have to do something a little different. So if I put the last two dowels in, actually I can't get the last one in because I don't have enough room. But if I put one more dowel in, the sixth dowel doesn't really cross the hook all the way. So what I'll have to do is I'll cut a block of wood to fit down into here and close that gap up. Slide a normal length dowel in between, and then the last dowel will just be shorter, and I'll have to put another block. So in the end, I'll have two blocks here that will go right up to this shoulder, and then when I put the cap on top of this, the plate, that should keep everything in place, and it reduces the total amount of dowel that I have to use and keeps everything stable. And then I went back and applied 3 coats of shellac and also some hand-rubbed wax into the surface before I went on to do final assembly. And now it's installation day. I made a template from paper for those keyholes on the back, and here I'm just leveling out the piece of paper to make sure everything is correct, and that also the keyholes are in the correct position before I start drilling holes in my client's wall. There we go, it holds a jacket, and my clients were really happy about this project and how it turned out. And stay tuned for the next part of this video where I will be showing how I built the shoe rack.